Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, self publishing creator, and I share my creative process creating comics and artwork here with you live online. If you would like to support this channel, get bonus videos, see more behind the scenes work in my creative process, you can go to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. For as little as $2 a month, you can support this channel and get additional bonus content. If you would like to read some of my comic books for free, get a look at the work that I'm creating, you can go to comics.jeremy.net. There, it will direct you to a page where there is some free PDF previews of each of my comics for you to check out. And if you would like to buy some of my comics physically or in a digital format on Amazon Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will redirect you to my Amazon author page where you can see some of my where you can purchase physical copies of my books. So I see a couple of people are already here. I see Amaris is already in the chat. Hey, thanks for making it. Ion Rocks is in the chat as well. Thanks for showing up, guys. So, before we get into today's live stream, hang on, let me adjust the camera a little bit so you can see more of the actual page that I'm going to be working on. It's not a comic page. I'm actually finishing up another original piece of artwork for something that ties into my first, well, really just my main two pieces of information I wanted to mention at the top here. Next week, no live stream because I will be exhibiting at the amazing Las Vegas Comic-Con. There is a link in the chat to the convention. I will be exhibiting at Artist Alley C19. I think in previous live streams I might have mentioned it and I gave the wrong table number. The correct table number will be C19. So if you're in the Southwest, if you're planning to go to that show or you just want to have a good fun weekend in Vegas, come on out and check it out. I see Dudeker's Clarence's Fortnite is in the chat as well. How you doing? Thanks for showing up. So, anyway, next week, no live stream. I'll be at amazing Las Vegas Comic-Con C19. This piece, I've been working on a series of originals over the past few weeks to just have some more original art to sell. Something besides just prints and comics. So I usually don't sell originals of my comic book pages. Oh! I see it's my nephew Clay. He's got a all right, Clay, how you doing? Thanks for showing up. I guess he's got a handle for Google now. All right. Well, anyway, this particular piece that I'm working on is it's all of the new originals I've been doing are more closely related to Morningstar. I've been trying to either use characters or themes that kind of fit more in with the comic. And so this is an illustration of basically the queen demon Isbaal. And I want to have her kind of nuzzling a horse. See, Clay says he's doing good. I'm doing well. You know, getting ready for a comic convention next weekend. Yeah, so this piece, the idea behind it was that I wanted to have, well, a lot of my pieces start off, this is just a 4x6 index card. I'll bring this a little closer so you can see it. A lot of times I'll just have an idea for a piece of artwork, and I'll just scribble it down on whatever I have handy. Post-it notes, index cards. If I've got a sketchbook handy, I'll put it in there. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why I'm not super big on like showing off my sketchbooks, because most of my sketchbooks are a lot more of ideas and scribbles. They're like a journal, as opposed to some people have sketchbooks that are beautiful works of art unto themselves. I have a couple of pieces of reference photos I took here of the arm so that I can adjust this arm, because this arm's a little bit wonky. And Amaris asks, when designing a print, how big should they be? Well, that is a matter of opinion because prints come in all matter of sizes. I personally tend to make my prints 11 by 17 because that's kind of the size favored by comic creators. It's the size that an original comic page tends to be drawn at. It's not an uncommon size, but it's one that most people, it's not as common as like a 11 by 14, 12 by 18, 16 by 20, but it is common enough that if you go to most art stores, you can find 11 by 17 frames. So most of my prints and my originals tend to be that size, although this one I'm working on here is 9 by 12. And 9 by 12 is closer to the if you were to scale it up, it's that 8 by 10, 11 by 14 size, like that proportion. And in fact, I have a little chart I found online. I just looked up what are common frame sizes, what are common sizes for the mat opening, and what are the common image sizes. And this is something that I keep in mind because right now I'm doing a lot of pieces on 9 by 12, and the art itself, actual image is I've been doing them on 9 by 12 paper, and the image itself is 8 by 10. So I've been designing for a matte frame of 11 by 14. So it'll be 11 by 14. The opening inside is 7.5 by 9.5. Now, I didn't make up these numbers. I just did a Google size for common frame sizes and common mat sizes. That's all I did. I Google searched that. This chart in text was one of the things that I found. So I just copied it, pasted it, and printed it out. And in my mind, the reason for that is because you want to make it easy for people to frame your work if they're going to buy your prints or originals. And like I said, 11 by 17 is a common enough size that people can find frames for it. But I think actually going forward, I'm going to start phasing out the 11 by 17s, and I'm going to start doing images where the final image size is going to be 11 by 14, and then it'll be framed 16 by 20. So these are some common sizes just to look at in terms of like 8 by 10, 11 by 14, 16 by 20. For each of these sizes, you can either frame that with no bleed, or you can look at the next size up and see, like, say, a 16 by 20, you might want to mat that with a 20 by 24, or if you were to do 11 by 14, that's probably the largest I'm going to go for originals and prints will be 11 by 14, and then people can mat it to 16 by 20, which is a pretty good sized wall image. But like I said, again, 12 by 18 is a common size as well. It really comes down to what you think people are going to pay, what size they're going to want for artwork, and how much it's going to cost for you to get prints of those made. So yeah, there's not one set size. And another thing, conventions, look at other people's artwork. Look at the size of the prints that they have. Decide what size you want to have. Decide how big of a container you want to haul to conventions if you're going to be bringing your art. Because for me, bringing stuff, like I see prints that are 16 by 20 that are beautiful, but I don't have room to display those on my convention table. It would be a real pain in the ass for me to haul all that gear to conventions. So that's something that I keep in mind. So if you guys have any more questions in the chat, feel free to jump in. I'm eventually going to start basically working on fixing this arm. And I just took some quick photo reference of myself with the arm in similar positions to look at while I make these adjustments. But let me zoom in a little bit more. Actually, no, we'll leave this wide because I'm going to show you some books. When I was working on this piece and I realized I needed just to look at some reference, it was a little frustrating for me because I feel like it shouldn't be very hard to draw an arm in this position for as many years as I've been drawing. I should be able to knock this out pretty quickly. But when you're having problems, first thing you do, go get some reference. Look at the real thing and compare it to your drawing. So I can't be too proud and say, oh, I should be able to draw this, so I'm just going to tough it out. It's like, no, dumbass. Just go look at some reference. Or photograph some reference of yourself. I see Art with Osir B is in the chat. Good afternoon. Nice to see you. Thanks for dropping in. Clay asks, are you making a comic? And yes, I am making a comic, but this piece I'm working on here is actually, it's not a page from my comic book. It's just one of the characters from my comic book. And Amara says, no, he's making... she's just answering his question. No, I'm making prints. Yeah, so this is a print. It's a character from my comic book, but it's not the comic book itself. But books, art books, reference. There's a reason why I am taking so long to get around to doing. Is because when I took this photo reference, there's a video I've made before that's kind of... For my Patreon subscribers... there is an exclusive tour, like an hour-long tour of my reference bookshelf of drawing books, anatomy books, and I go through that. But specifically, one of the things I also have here is the horse. And I wanted to pull some good photos of a horse's eye to look at because I want to get the expression. My whole thing is that I don't want the horse to look frightened by this creature. I want the horse to actually look very calm, if not peaceful, and fond of her because I feel like I like to draw creepy stuff, but I don't like the creepiness to be like blood and guts. I like it to be something that's sort of unsettling. And the idea of having a monster nuzzling up to a horse and the horse actually being more than okay with it, to me, there's something about that that is unsettling. To me, that's what makes this creepy. Not that she's a creature, not that she's caressing the face of the horse. So that's what I was going for. And I realized I have a lot of animal reference books. So I was just going to show you real quick some of those books because I realized I've got all kinds of books on human reference and anatomy reference. And in looking through those, I didn't find the pose that I wanted. So I just took a quick picture of myself. Speaking of which, Art with Osir says, I am notorious for not using reference. I have tried to use them more often. I have a hard head and have drawn for years with no reference. And have drawn from no reference for years. I am slowly changing. You know what? There's no shame in that because it took me years to start using reference, and a big part of that is that people, when they tell you to use reference, no one actually shows you how to use reference. And believe me, there is an art to using it. And if you look at my videos, if you search my channel, there's some videos on Norman Rockwell, and I have a pretty long video where I go into a book of photography, and I compare how Norman Rockwell does his concept sketches versus him actually going and doing photo reference once he already knows what he wants to draw. And I think it's a difference where some people think you just find the photo and then you draw what's in the photo. And the way Rockwell works, and I think the way a lot of the illustration masters of the early 20th century, what they do is they work out their concept first. They'll do a bunch of sketches and figure out the idea. And then they will create the reference of what their idea is. They will pose the models in the position of their sketches. Because much like this sketch, the arm looks a little bit off. And then I'm like, oh, but this is the idea. Fully formed, this is the idea worked out. Then I take the photo of what my idea is and I correct it. I correct the image. That's sort of what more classical illustrators do is they figure out their idea first. So the idea is leading the reference. The reference does not lead the idea. You make what it is in your head, try to make it as close to what is in your imagination, and then you look at what does the real thing look like. You get models and you pose them in the pose of your sketches, and then you come back to the actual piece of artwork you're making, and you make corrections to give it a more of a sense of authenticity, or just to make it feel more realistic, to make it feel more solid. So, before I get into drawing here, because we're already 13 minutes in, and I've just been talking here, and I haven't shown you any of the books yet. So, these are the reference books. The first one I got is a book called The Anatomy of the Horse by George Stubbs. And I saw this book, James Gurney mentioned it on his blog, Gurney Journeys. And he's got a great, it's honestly, the book is mostly text. If you look at like the first, it's not a long book. It's maybe 80-ish pages. Let me see if it's page numbers here at the bottom. Yeah, it's like, well, actually, no, it's a little over 100 pages, 112 pages. The actual plates, the anatomy plates don't start until page 86. So the first 80 pages are all anatomical notes on animals. That said, when you get to the actual plates, it's just, going into the skeleton of the horse. And then it just works in layers, like a dissection. You start with the skeleton. You start with him actually labeling the bones in a clean line. Then a rendered version where you can see the different points that are coming off, the curvatures, the forms, and the volumes of the bones. Then for the different thing, same thing from a different pose. Then it gets into, a couple more poses, and then he starts laying the actual, under the deep tissue muscles. then going into surface muscles, and basically it just does that over a few poses. So this book unto itself is not super in depth in terms of animal anatomy. It doesn't have a ton of reference, but it's good for getting into the structures. And I think it was only, let me see, the cover price here is $20, but I think I bought it from a used bookstore for like maybe less than $10. So it was a reasonable buy for not spending a lot of time on it, for not spending a lot of money on it. Let's see here. Art with Osir also says, oh wait, there's more people in the chat. Let me give you guys some shout outs real quick. Ion Rocks also says, do what's necessary, in terms of referring to reference altogether. Art of Reed says hello. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for joining us. Art with Osir says, that is somewhat similar to what I did for my animation series when developing those characters. I finally, those books I ordered. Sorry, this stream is disappearing as the chat's disappearing as I'm trying to read it. Let's see here. Art with Osir says, those books I ordered last time I was on your stream, I guess finally received. Sometimes we lose a word in the chat here. Finally received those books when I was on your stream 2 weeks ago. Good. I hope those books were extremely helpful. So this is one that I had with me while I was sketching out the horse head. I would not put this high on my list of must-haves. It's a nice book to have, but I actually have a few other books that have kind of similar content. It's just one that it's the most recent one I have, so I'm mentioning it. So I wouldn't put this at your top list. There's a couple of other books I'll get to that I definitely say are must-haves. This book is from the Body World exhibit. I went a couple of years ago, and they had not just the book of the most recent exhibit, but they had books from past Body Worlds exhibits, and they had one that's just on animals. And so on this one, it has basically deep dissections of different animals. But along with getting these cross sections, it's got let's see here. It's got stuff on the actual process of the plastinization process. But then they've just got poses of animals, sort of like it's real life dissection. These are actual, animals that were really dissected, and you can see them kind of positioned how they would look with different layers of skin and tissue taken off, so you can see below the surface. So this one, again, not necessarily a must-have, but I found it very interesting because it's something that, much like the Body World exhibit itself, it's kind of rare to see animals in that stage, so it's kind of unique. Now we're getting to the books that I've had for years and that I definitely consider must-haves. As you guys know, I am a big fan of Jack Hamm and all of his drawing books, not to be confused with John Hamm from Mad Men. Jack Hamm, another one of his books, How to Draw Animals, and this one gets into just a wide variety, jumping right here to the horse page. It's funny that I think it opens this way naturally because I've used this section so much. But this book goes deep into proportion. Does this for a variety of different animals, but it goes into, the anatomy and structural, the skeleton, the muscles, proportion, and then the rest of each animal has a section on different poses and different physical traits. In terms of horses, it gets into their gaits, the trots and the canters. Different poses. It's kind of like the Muybridge photography, showing a step-by-step animation of how horses run. Then just a variety of poses, and it has, it doesn't have like every single animal under the sun, but it's got horses, elephants, wolves, dogs, cow and oxen. Towards the front, it's got variety of big cats, tigers, mountain lions, wide variety, just your regular domesticated dog, a few different breeds in there. Gets into the bone structures and gets into a lot of comparative anatomy of what animals have in general. So this one I would say is probably number one on my list of reference books for drawing animals. After that, I would say Ken Hultgren's The Art of Animal Drawing. And if this is number two, it's only by a margin. You could do just as well getting this one over the Jack Hamm book, depending on what your particular references, your tastes are. Um, I think the only reason why I like the Jack Hamm book is because there's a little bit more of anatomical breakdown, whereas this one is more of poses and volumes, and it covers kind of the same thing, where it covers like general species. This one I think is mostly mammals. I don't think that it has. There might be birds in here. I'll have to double check. I haven't looked that closely, but it's got foxes, dogs, caricatured sections. This one is probably more better. This is probably better for animators in that it gets into breaking animals down to basic volumes, tubes, cylinders, and primitive forms, and getting their basic proportions down. Everything from zebras, horses, bears, gorillas, and such. So this one also has a lot more on movement. This one really gives you a sense of movement and flow. This one's probably more animation oriented. This one's more anatomy oriented. But these two are excellent books. And then as another one that I would put right behind that, the Weatherly Guide to Drawing Animals. This one is also an excellent book, and the only reason why it probably isn't at my top is because I haven't spent as much time drawing with it. I only got this one a couple of years ago. I had asked my figure drawing instructor Carl Ganas for some reference books on animals because he's referred many, like probably, I mean, at least five of the anatomy books I own are books that just I didn't have before, and he mentioned them, and I'm like, oh wow, I should really get that. But then I realized I don't have as much reference on animals as I should have, particularly with me drawing horses and other animals in a Morningstar, and also just for creating creatures. Using animals as reference for inventing monsters, creatures, mythical beings, aliens. Looking at animal anatomy is great for that, and that's not anything new that I'm inventing. That's something that I've learned from instructors, YouTube videos, and just all around hearing people say that animals are great for inventing anatomy. But this one again is probably closer to the Ken Hultgren book in that it does have anatomy in it, but it's a lot more about the structure. It's a lot more about the gesture and the flow of these creatures, breaking them down into simple forms, keeping their proportions. So yeah, this one is also an excellent one. A lot of elephants. Let's see, tigers. Yeah, but I mean, it really gives you, much like this diagram, it gives you a lot of what's going on with the flow and the movement of these creatures. And as a companion piece to the Weatherly book is a book by David Coleman. This was the second one that my instructor Carl Ganas recommended, and it's The Art of Animal Character Design. This one, it's just such a beautiful book. Sometimes you look at stuff and you're just like, it's so frustrating how beautiful someone else's work is, because you're like, wow, I'm never gonna make stuff as great as his. This one is definitely more animation oriented because there's a lot more of very rounded, cartoony, or just they're going a lot more. He's going for a lot more of the character of these animals. I mean, it is called animal character design, and so the animals that are in here are not just like you're going to the zoo or you're doing study for the Natural History Museum. He's catching a lot of personality and not, I won't say exaggerating, but he's plussing them. He's definitely creating that sense of the feel, the personality of these creatures. And in some of them, he is exaggerating, he's cartooning. But even when he's not cartooning, even when it's realistic, he's getting that personality, that all important personality in these drawings. So this is a book with a wide variety of animals in it, and it's got some fantasy creatures as well. So this one, yeah, this is also a beautiful book. And I think the only other one I have back here, and this one is just purely reference, is the DK book series. Pretty much everything they have, there's a subject that you need reference on. If you're writing a Western or drawing a Western, go get a DK book on the Old West. If you're doing a science fiction book, you can get one on space exploration or space travel. They probably have a few. If you're doing a book about cooking, I'm sure they have DK books on, like, I don't know, kitchen layout or chef designer. The point is they have books on literally every topic you can think of. And if you just need to get some visual authenticity for whatever you're drawing, this book is great for it. Because this is the most extensive in terms of it only gives you one or two images of each animal, but it goes through the entire animal kingdom. So, we've got leopards in there. So it goes through mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and invertebrates. So this gets, if you go through it, it's much more like an encyclopedia. You get like one shot, one image of a particular animal, and it also has animals by environments as well. So like in the mountains, it has like different types of goats you'll find, marmots, mountain lions, the peregrine falcons, deer. So, it has both environment and then specific, phylum or kingdoms of animals. But it just gives you a short, like, encyclopedia entry on that particular animal. And then it'll give you a short entry on the animal, just a paragraph or two. It'll show you what part of the world it's from, then a photo of it. So it has this, like for here, it's got marsupials, it's got, kangaroos and wallabies and such. For carnivores, it's got a carnivore section. It's got a wide variety of cats. This is probably the best, for waterfowl. It's got a wide variety. So this one is much more encyclopedic. If you just need to know what something generally looks like, feathering, coloring, patterns, scales, what have you, you can look at this and then you have to extrapolate further and say, well, all right, how's this going to look from the angle that I need to draw it? But this is just sort of a great quick reference for animals as a whole. Again, this is almost like stuff you would find if you were to just Google a particular animal and you would come with these kind of images. But the fact that it gives you this additional context in the book in one place is super, super handy. So these are just my books on animal reference. And I thought of sharing that with you because I was looking at this horse and I realized I didn't have a good shot of the eye that I wanted. So I don't know if I'll even get to finishing this and starting the inking on this piece, but I'm at least going to try and finish up the horse's eye and fix this arm. And after that, it'll be ready for inking. You guys may not get to see that because we've already gone a half hour and I've been jibber jabbering. But you know what? Let me know if this kind of stuff is useful and entertaining to you versus just me getting down to business and drawing every week. Because I do realize there's a lot of things that I want to do to make the channel better and more interesting for you guys. I appreciate you showing up every week. But I always do kind of wonder how much of it needs to be me sitting down and saying, what do I need to work on? And me just sharing that process versus if there's ways that I can do what I need to do, but at the same time, create more value for you, show you more things that are interesting. I want to always at least be open to that so that it's not just me, me glorifying me, Let's see here. I went on a run, so let me run through the chats real quick. Clay said he's going to fly the Black Panther drone I gave him. Thank you. Yeah, I sent him a toy from the Black Panther movie. And Art with Osier says, I got your book as well. It was a bit small for my old eyes, but it seemed like it is a series of comics compiled into one novel. I will spend some time to read it over the next couple of weeks. Thank you. I appreciate you checking the book out. Yeah, it is. The series is an 8-issue series, and that book has the first 4 issues. So I'm actually working on the last issue of the series, now. But yeah, so it's a collection of a story, and it actually ends on an interesting cliffhanger. But I think that hopefully it's a satisfying read for the first chunk. Art with Osier also says, I need to do this more for environments. I believe he's talking about the reference, and I am the same. My environments still don't feel as rich and authentic as I would like them to be. He says, I did use a lot of reference for my angel character because I took another approach using deep sea life for angels I created because they have different appearance from heaven, fallen, current, and hell. That's a really good idea. Looking at different different creatures that are very far away from what you're working on. Like, let's say I was going to do insects. I'm like looking at how can I create bees, spiders, and creating angels based on those things. Beetles. it would give you a really interesting a look that no one else is doing. So I think, yeah, using sea creatures for that, that's a great idea. Um, Mighty Geek Studios chimes in. Thanks for stopping in. He said anatomy books are a wonderful tool. Clay asks, how long have I been drawing? I have been drawing. Should ask your dad. Clay is my nephew, by the way. For those who are just chiming in, your dad probably has a better idea of when I started drawing, but I can remember being as old as in kindergarten and taking my brother's old composition notebooks from school, and I would take those, and at each school year, he had a bunch of just empty composition notebooks, and I would take those and fill them up with drawings and crayon. So, so yeah, I guess probably since I was 6. But yeah, I mean, the thing about drawing, I actually heard, and I wish I could remember the name of the artist so I could give her proper attribution. But I heard an interview with an artist who was talking about people asking how long someone had been drawing or when did they start. And she pointed out to them, to the interviewer, that people ask her this question all the time, and her reply is, well, when did you stop drawing? Because when we're little kids in school, everyone draws. We all draw all the time. And it's like, why do we reach a point where we feel like, for some reason, I think her point was that it's usually when people start getting graded. When you're being judged on artwork, that's when people lose interest in it. It stops being fun for them because making art is very hard. And for a long time, you're making it without making much progress. And it really doesn't, you can look at it and you can kind of beat yourself up. As I've talked about in previous videos, that nature of beating yourself up because your art's never as good as you want it to be. But I think the people that start drawing and keep doing it, they're doing it simply because they love it. And the point is not that they started doing it at a certain time. The point is they just stuck with something that they really enjoy. So I'm kind of flipping through these art books now, trying to find a good shot of horse's eyes to look at while I'm working on this. See Travis Fredericks in the chat. What's up, man? Thanks for stopping in. I also see Art with Osier says, my mom says, my mom says for me 4, but I have not been doing it professionally, just as a hobby. I feel like I was better at drawing 20, 25 years ago, so I've been drawing almost 46 years. If I have spent half or a third of my time doing that professionally, I would have mastered it decades ago. Wow, I admire your dedication. I definitely feel like even though I've been drawing most of my life consistently, I was never actively studying, and I didn't really start actively studying anatomy and figure drawing until about a decade ago. And that's when I saw my growth really begin to happen. And I wish that I had taken that side of academic drawing as seriously as I did the creative, I just want to make stuff up and have fun, because I do feel like it's very easy for me to make stuff up and go with interesting ideas. My real challenge is that my actual execution of that, I feel like my execution of ideas does not necessarily live up to how interesting the idea might be. And I'm trying to as I continue studying and using reference and all these things, trying to slowly creep up on that and get closer to that and improving on it. So there's a couple of good horse photos in here, but not really. You know what? Let me take a look at this, at my animal reference, the DK book. Because what I really want, the same with this cover, has some nice, deep, intense, intense gaze of a baboon. What I really want is a nice, intense look at like a horse's head, horse's eyes. Not intense. I actually want the horse to be kind of peaceful and relaxed, but I kind of want to see that soulful gaze. Look in here in the back. I see Mighty Geek Studios says most of us didn't start studying anatomy until late. And Iron Rocks just has a dot dot dot, which is like, yeah, that's true. For a lot of us, the time when we actually realize how much we need that, by the time we realize how much we need it, we also realize how much time we wasted that we could have been studying academic drawing, and we all like, wow, I'd be so awesome if only. But it's like that I believe it's a Chinese or Japanese proverb where they say the best time to plant a tree it was 25 years ago. The second best time is right now. That's true for studying figure drawing as well. Travis Frederick asks if that's a Jack Hamm animal drawing book, and yes, it is. It is. It's I'm guessing that you probably own the book, so you recognized it on site. But yeah, Jack Hamm, How to Draw Animals. It's one of my go-tos. Although the one thing I'm finding is I don't have a nice picture of horse eyes in this. I love how I'm not drawing anything. This entire live stream has become the reference stream, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Again, people don't get to see how important reference is. Or I think for me, part of showing all of this stuff, which I don't think is boring, but part of reason for showing is I think a lot of artists struggle with making artwork and wondering why pieces don't come out well, but they don't necessarily use reference, or they don't have a variety of reference sources to work from. And I feel like showing the work that I go through to find the correct reference for what I need will hopefully demystify it a little bit and make people really realize that reference just it helps you make the awesome art just doesn't come out of nowhere. There are very few artists that are just magically talented. Like Kim Jong-il is a freak of nature. He can draw amazingly, but even with him, he still spent years and years drawing before he developed the level that he has now, where he can just. I'm nowhere near that, but I feel like I'm in that phase where I do believe that if you draw for a certain number of years consistently, you develop a mental vocabulary that you don't constantly have to pull up reference for every single piece that you do. There's a lot of stuff that you've drawn this similar poses over and over again, or similar environments, similar backgrounds or vehicles. At a certain point, you can shorthand it. And then you still will pull up reference just to look at specific details, almost like spot checking something, measuring twice before you cut. I'm quiet because I'm trying to find the horses here in this reference book. I do not know why they don't have a very long horse section in here. So you've just got hooved mammals and cattle, and I really thought that somewhere in here it'd have a nice big picture of horses' eyes. I don't see that. So let's switch to the Ken Hultgren book. I keep moving my chat up to the side so I can read it while I'm talking to you guys, because I realize that my voice sounds a little muffled. If I'm facing down at the screen so I can read the chat while I'm doing this, then you get a little bit of that and you can't quite hear me. It's just the difference between me looking at the mic versus looking away from the mic. So hopefully I want to keep the sound coming in clear. Art with Osier says that's when I did figure drawing and more exploration in art in the late 80s and early 90s. That's why I said that. I did more anatomy study in college, but I stopped. And Travis says that yes, he owns a copy of the Jack Hamm book. Yeah, I did study figure drawing in college, but I didn't stick with it. And the funny thing is I didn't stick with it because it's figure drawing is hard, as I think a lot of people that have done it know. It's challenging, and I thought, well, I like my drawings when they're coming out of my imagination better. I enjoy those more. So I thought, well, let me just stick. I'm just a guy who draws out of his imagination. I didn't realize that if I stuck with figure drawing for years and years and years, it would strengthen my imaginative drawing. I don't think, because I didn't go through a traditional illustration program. I went through a fine art program, and they were very hands off in terms of they just wanted to encourage you to come up with ideas, make stuff, and figure out where you want to go for yourself. I believe if you're going to be going into illustration, animation, comics, concept design, that artists definitely benefit more from the strong hand of a structured academic figure drawing program. It can be challenging because you don't like being told, draw exactly like this, do these exercises. I was much more stubborn when I was younger, and that's saying something because I'm pretty goddamn stubborn now. But as a kid, I was super hard-headed and didn't really want to. Like, I would take class. They had a class in perspective that I took as a child, and I really enjoyed it. But surface premises of a concept that I'm being taught, and then I run with it and try to just do my own thing. Based, you teach me 1 point, 2 point perspective. I'm like, all right, I know everything I need to know. I'm gonna go make everything with just those tools. And that's really not enough. I think that going to doing deep dive exercises is really what will help you grow and learn. So I like this photo right here. This horse eye and this horse eyelid and the muscles around it are kind of what I want to convey. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this not this Hamm, this Ken Hultgren eye. You know what? I'll put the Hultgren book down here, and I'll put the Hamm above it while I work on these eyes. So, okay, look at that. We're actually getting around to some drawing. Only 40 minutes into the live stream. But like I said, reference is important. All right. Pencil, a couple erasers. Sharpen this bad boy up. Let's see here. Art with Osir says, I love figure drawing, especially gesture drawing. Went to school for advertising and illustration. Said Pinterest is my go-to for reference, and I create a bunch of pins for reference, which I definitely agree is a great idea. I don't do that as often as I should, only because I tend to just photograph myself or little figures. But yes, I definitely, I probably use Google image search more than I will use Pinterest, but Pinterest is actually, I think, a great tool, and I probably need to start relying on that more for reference, as it's built for that. So thanks for the reminder. And like I said, just got to get around to using them. Iron Rock says, I think there's been useful information. I guess in terms of me asking, going this deep dive into reference. Huh. All right. It looks like if I put my iPad up top above the screen, it looks like it's not going to slide down while I'm drawing. So here's to hoping it stays in place. So start here. As a matter of fact, let me just turn this so it's at the angle. Otherwise, I'm going to draw the horse's eye at the wrong angle. Because this horse's head slanted that way, so I'm going to put my drawing parallel to the reference looking at. Let's just put that lower lid in there first. I'm going to bring the camera down so that you guys can really get in this a little bit more. Hopefully that's a little bit better. All right. Put first the larger muscle that's around the eyelid before the actual thin eyelid itself. And I want the horse to feel relaxed, so I think I'm gonna put the lid just a little bit more closed than it is. In the reference. And like human eyes, I'm gonna put that little triangle of flesh, probably exaggerating it more than it should be. That little triangle of flesh in the corner. Right here in this moment, I'm reminded of an anecdotal story, or apocryphal. I don't know for sure if it's true, but the late great Jack Kirby, I think, was working one time on Captain America, and I believe that his partner at the time was Joe Sinnott inking. And there's one point where Jack, I mean, we all know the legend of how incredibly fast Jack Kirby is, you know, doing up to like 10 or 20 pages in one day. But early on in his career, perhaps maybe he wasn't as fast or built up to it, because his inker, Joe Sinnott, I guess they had art tables that were facing each other. And Kirby's working on a page, and he takes his eraser and he's going in there and he's doing this and that. And from the other side of the table, you hear, hey, what are you doing? And Kirby's like, I'm erasing. Sinnott's like, you get paid for penciling, not erasing. So just the idea that I'm sitting here and I'm being all finessey and trying to, draw a line, erase a line. I guess this is the traditional artist equivalent of Control Alt or Control Z, just constantly drawing and undoing, trying to get just right. That I'm sitting here and putting down lines and then refining and removing them, and then putting down more lines and refining and removing them. Let's see here. More in the chat. Art with Osier says, I grew up with the line most artists have, where you must be able to create without reference when everything around you is reference. Yeah, I don't know who started the rumor that using reference is bad, but that person needs to be taken out behind a woodshed and beaten, because that idea has done more harm to a lot of illustrators and art students than any other idea I can think of. The idea that reference is somehow cheating or it's wrong. And I think, honestly, after basic fundamentals, anatomy and volume and proportion, the next thing artists should be taught in schools or in any type of artistic program is how to use reference. And, the only reason why I don't really go into that as much is because I still don't think I have mastered the art of using reference. I think that reference is a lot more visible in artists that are doing more realism, whereas mine's more illustrative and cartoony. I think that artists that do more of imaginative realism, you can see more of that power of that reference. But then again, it's also, I think, just as important, it's probably more important for me to show the use of reference because of the fact that my artwork is not realistic, but seeing how important reference is to me, even though I'm not a photorealistic artist. And again, I really encourage you, if you're interested in this, if you're interested in, you need to know how to use, people tell you to use reference, but you don't know how, search for Norman Rockwell in the search button of my channel, and you'll see a couple of videos I have on Norman Rockwell using reference. And that's probably the deepest that I go in terms of an analytical part of reference is me dissecting Norman Rockwell's process. And again, that's a case of me wanting to be a better artist. So I am going and I'm sharing with you stuff that I'm studying. That video I was making was just as much for me as it was probably more for me than it was for you guys. And even though this eye seems almost all black, I'm gonna go in here and add some more. I'm really patting the line here. That is something that, I mean, again, I'll fix it when I'm inking, but I'm definitely going in here, I'm doing as opposed to long, bold, confident strokes. And that's something that I'm always trying to be aware of the things that I am not doing well and the things I want to improve at. As I'm trying to talk quickly, I'm slurring and sloppy with my speech a little. Let me drink a little sip of water, getting dried out with all this jibber jabber. Oh, back to the chat. So, yeah, Travis says, drawing from reference is a great help for artists to improve on his or her skill level of art. Ion Rocks, going back to Kirby, 80 pages a month. Brutal, bro. That is for real. Yeah, there's a reason why Kirby is called the king. In fact, I was just talking to a friend about that the other day, and the fact that I'm not particularly adventurous with my page layouts. My friend Carl Altstetter, who you can also find on Google. If you search for him, he's got his DeviantArt. He's big on Instagram. That's where you see most of his work. But he's a good friend of mine and a hell of a mentor. Amazing art. Taught me a tremendous amount about storytelling. And he was giving me some friendly criticism about the fact that my approach is a little bit static because as I mentioned in the video I did last week, where I'm starting with a 9-panel grid for most things. But the reason why I've been going at that approach is more because when you look at, say, Jack Kirby and his work, he does so much within the panel that even though he's known for these bombastic characters breaking out of the panel border, that the page itself is very simple compositions, 6-panel grids, sometimes 3 tiers, but he keeps his actual page layouts not particularly complex. It's what's happening within the panel borders. It's incredibly dynamic. And my whole thing is I don't want to get caught up in just doing innovative panel designs. Like sometimes, like for instance, somebody like J.H. Williams, he does amazing, beautiful, inventive panel designs, but I think he is a master storyteller. And I think that it would be a mistake for me to try to mimic his level of complex, intricate, innovative panel designs when I'm still mastering story, when I'm still learning the craft of just the basic storytelling. So it's almost like I'm trying to force myself to stick with the basics until I really am more like hot fire and I really have my storytelling chops down. And at that point, maybe I'll start exploring more innovative page layouts. But for now, I'm sticking with just the simple what I showed in last week's live stream, where I start with a 9-panel grid and then build into the page around that. I see that the invocating the name of Kirby has brought out a flurry of comments. Everyone loves talking about Kirby. Art with Osir says, yeah, that's why I draw with pens when I draw on actual paper. I tend to use a bunch of seeking lines. When I did teach, I taught people how to trace for illustration in Illustrator. Even tracing is an art and was really difficult to do with difficult for them to do effectively. I agree, because the problem with tracing is that you tend to lose a lot of that life and things feel stiff, which I think is where maybe that's where that idea of using reference is the idea that the misconception that using reference is bad may come from is that stiffness that you get when you just trace. But that's also the problem is a lot of people don't clarify that using reference is not the same as tracing. Tracing, you are tracing reference material, but using reference in drawing, obviously two different things. Art with Osir also says it also helps with a younger, newer artist to see things the eye is not trained to see. Ion Rock says Kirby was in a flow state for decades. Art with Osir says Kirby was also a master at shortcuts that helped him as well with his speed. Mighty Geek says that when we first start drawing, we're basically copying what we see. And that is the interesting thing. I agree with all of those points. And yeah, when we first start out, we're drawing this our interpretation of the world around us. And I think that may come from that, I think may inform the idea of tracing. Whereas over time, when you study drawing, you start learning that it becomes a combination of what we observe, what we've learned in books, and what we're feeling. And that's a tough thing to combine all of those, because learning how to feel the emotional part of your artwork, for some people that comes naturally, and all of the academic draftsmanship is the hard part. For other people, the academic stuff comes easy, but everything just kind of feels like a photo, but it feels like a photo that doesn't necessarily have a viewpoint to it. And then for some people, it's somewhere in between. We're all kind of on a spectrum. So far, you know what? Here, I want to see, this is what's interesting. I drew an eye from reference, albeit, drawing reference as opposed to photo reference. And it doesn't feel like what I want it to feel like. Even though I wanted the eye to feel relaxed, I also want it to be kind of wide. So I'm going to drop that lower lid down more. All right. So I'm going to get into fixing the arm here. And I'm going to go a little bit long because, again, I spent such a long time going through reference books before getting into drawing. So I'll go for maybe another 5 minutes or so while I work on fixing this arm. And then if you guys have any questions in the chat, you can toss those in. And I'll answer one or two questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, I'll just work on fixing this arm real quick, and then we'll call it a day for this week. And yes, it is a little weird, the fact that I want this creature to have a long, slender arm, and yet I'm using my arm. And mind you, it's not like I'm a bodybuilder, but I definitely don't have the slender build that that this character Isbaal from my comic has. But I find for me, it's more sort of like I want to make sure I get the landmarks in place. And once I get the landmarks in place, then I can exaggerate. I don't need to make it exactly as it is in my my sketch. And just looking at this, I realize I put the shoulder too far back. I look at how far back, even though this character is turned more towards instead of away, that I've got this shoulder pushed all the way back. When in reality, if this arm is reaching forward, this is why reference is important. I realize that if this arm is reaching forward, then the shoulder blade should be in here. You should actually be seeing kind of the rounding of the back, and this whole shoulder should be moved more forward. This is something that I would like to think I would have been able to just draw naturally out of my head. But again, little simple anatomical things that by the fact that I was drawing out of my head, I didn't get right. But now that I've got the reference there, I can look at it and say, oh, wait, it should really, if I want this to feel correct, I should move the deltoid particularly forward. And maybe move it up a tiny bit to get a little bit of that character leaning up and in. And I feel like I should pull these eyes down a little bit more. This skull is bigger than I want it to be. And Rock says, I prefer photo reference. Mighty Geek Studio says, in this case, it's about how the arm works. Yes, that's very true. That's going back to the whole George Bridgman stuff, the idea of really understanding the mechanics of the thing that you're drawing. Now that I'm tweaking the shape of the skull, I'm going to move the eyes around a little bit more. And I probably can move the hair down a little bit. Even though she has very like 80s punk rock hair. I can show you a couple of little thumbnails. Where was I? Where was this? That's Bristol board. Oh. A couple nights ago, I was having dinner with Carl when we were having that conversation. I see Arthos here taking off. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good weekend. Let's see here. Yeah, I did a couple of different thumbnail comps with ink just to figure out where I wanted my lights and darks for this. So this totally probably feels the closest to what I want the final drawing to be like. And I guess I still didn't really lock down what I wanted for the head position because I kind of liked the idea of placing this head and drawing the head in with the character being perfectly parallel and having its head pressed against the horse's head, just to see how it looks like. I try not to be afraid of making radical changes to the drawing just to see if something works out. It's obviously much easier when you're working digitally and you can just save a layer. And again, if I really wanted to, I could also slap a piece of vellum on top and just draw it like that instead. But I have found that generally speaking, it is very rare for me to erase something and then regret it and feel like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I had it perfectly and I ruined it. More often than not, even if I were to draw the head in this position, erase it, draw it in a new position, decide I don't like it and decide I want this better, I have never had a situation where I did not feel like I improved something by drawing it a second or third time. There's always little things that I figure out how to tweak and improve and make better. So I try not to be afraid of radical change. But yeah. So at this point, just connecting the major anatomical points, the elbow to the wrist. Maybe slimming this wrist down a little bit. Because I do like the demons in, this is the queen demon for my comic Morningstar. I do like the demons to have sort of a spidery feel to them. So maybe that wrist should be a little narrower. And I think that's one of the reasons why I may have struggled with this arm so much, is because when I exaggerate these creatures' anatomy, that's one of those things that it's a challenge when you're doing that, because you want to have something feel realistic, but at the same time you also want to bend that nature of reality. It's using reality but then distorting it to feel fantastical, and it can be a thin line. It's real easy to try and exaggerate it and thinking that you're being inventive when really you're just being sloppy and falling into old bad habits. So I think that is one of the big challenges when doing creatures, which again, not an expert on creature design, but the challenge is to be inventive, but to be inventive in a way that relies on enough anatomical information that it doesn't feel like you're just being sloppy. It feels like you really are manipulating anatomy to something beyond just what we're familiar with. You know, like you could see it growing into this type of distortion, and it's definitely not human anatomy, but you're like, wow, that's believable. And the subtle thing of just making it feel spidery, which on the surface sounds like, oh, we'll just make it long and slender. But it's how it's long and slender. And these are the kind of things that I think over more and more years of drawing, it'll get to the point where this stuff will be second nature to me. At least that's the hope. And I won't think about it so much. But right now, I definitely think about like just how to make these subtle turns and subtle curves and just simple distortions that to get the feeling that I want. Spidery arms. All right. So the arms aren't 100% yet, but I'm going to keep drawing for a while on my own here, and I'm going to keep working from the reference. But I would like to keep these live streams to an hour or a little bit more than that. So we're going to call it a day. Thank you for now, everybody who joined us for the live stream. Let me fold up these books real quick so you can see our little station identification here. If you enjoyed these videos, if you'd like to support their creation of the content I have online for as little as $2 a month, you can go to patreon.com/Jeremy. You get a bonus live stream every month and additional Patreon exclusive blog posts. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to read some of my comic books, you can go to comics.jeremy.net. You can preview some PDFs there. And if you would like to buy some of my comics, you can get the actual physical books or Amazon Kindle on amazon.jeremy.net. That's it for now. Go be creative.